another mutual friend came to my house and said, "Oh, by the way, he jumped off a building and killed himself." Again, I'm not saying that if I had gone there and just listened and been there for him, that he wouldn't have done it. But at least I would have known that I did everything that I could have done. Whereas I realized very quickly that I did nothing. In fact, I might have even made it worse. And that's when I realized that one of the most, probably the most valuable thing you can do for another human being is give them your presence, to be fully there for them and to listen. Because when we say, "I'm there for you," what does that really mean?
Real men, raw stories, radical perspectives. This is the voice of authentic masculinity. This is Manhood Speaks. Garfield King, welcome to Manhood Speaks.
Thank you very much, Carlo. It's a pleasure, a privilege, and I think it's going to be a joy being here with you.
Most definitely. It's an honor to have you. So, who is Garfield King?
Oh, that's a question that I've been asking myself for close to 70 years plus.
Wow.
Where do you want me to begin? Well, I'm from Trinidad. I was born in Trinidad, but I left here in the end of 1958. I must have been about 4 years old or so at the time, to go to England with my parents. So I'm not going to spend all of your valuable time and the time of your years talking about my life story. But I think I always have to start with that, simply because when I start to speak, people wonder, well, where's that accent from, where you're from? And you must be a foreigner. I'm saying, well, no, I'm very much a Caribbean person. Even though I grew up and all my formative years were in the UK, my heritage is from St. Martin, Barbados, Trinidad, Venezuela, and St. Lucia. So, as with most Caribbean people, yes? And I say that because I am passionately a Caribbean person, and I'm passionately committed to trying to understand what it means to be fully human. And I think that what defines me is probably a quest for connection and better communication. That's really what my passion is. And I think it's a large extent of what I do and who I am. Yeah. Yeah. I don't know if that answers your question, because if you were looking for a historical perspective, I was born on this day and the sun was shining. But, that would take too long and be far, far too boring. Yes.
I think the response that you gave was a beautiful one and a very interesting one. So you said that your passion, your purpose is a quest for connection and communication.
Yeah. Yeah.
Why is that important to you?
It's a good question. And how do I answer that? Well, that means I'm going to have to go back in time again.
Sure.
Uh, you didn't tell me that this podcast was about time travel. Anyway, uh, anyway, going to England, growing up there, around the age of 6 or 7, I became fascinated with radio and the sound, not just the music, but the ability of commentators to be able to create images in my mind. And that was particularly the sports commentators, cricket. Yeah, cricket has never been a favorite sport of mine. Oops, should I said that? However, the commentators back then, they were able to describe the environment in such accurate detail that it enabled me to see and experience being in that environment. And the radio plays and the radio dramas were fascinating. So I thought, I want to do that. Would really like to be able to speak so that people can visualize things in their minds. And it really started there. And because I was always fascinated with music as well, in secondary school, studied violin and was in the school orchestra. And in my secondary school, I think I was the only boy of African descent in the school and one of the first in that particular school. So the thing about communicating was key for me because it was important that I was able to hold on to who and what I am while I'm searching for identity, because all of my influences were largely non black, except for the friends and stuff I had outside of schools, some of them, and of course, Spamouth. So there was always this quest of being able to, who am I, or identify who am I, and to be able to communicate that in a way that wasn't combative, but was a quest to, let us say, increase understanding. I'm using this language now. At the age of 11 and 12, I didn't have the language to say that. I just knew that I had to find a way of fitting in without sacrificing who and what I am. And I realized that communication was key to that because I was very interested in writing. I was very interested in visual arts like photography. And that's one of the reasons I also got interested in being a recorder of events, so much so that I wanted to be at one point a photojournalist. Um, but I was all, because of my involvement in music, with some friends, we formed a music group. We must have been about 12, 13, somewhere around there. And we ended up playing gigs in clubs and different events and things like that for a number of years. So a lot of my experience has always been about involvement in things that seek to connect with people on some sort of level. Yeah.
Mm. That's quite an interesting background that you have there. And you mentioned there was this search to fit in because being the only person of African descent in a predominantly white community in the UK. Tell me about were there any challenges that you encountered being this only person of African descent growing up in these communities?
Well, to clarify, in the secondary school, in the community where we lived, of course, there were people from the West Indies and different parts of the world. But I was specifically referring to secondary school.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, secondary school. And, but yeah, it, you can imagine 1959 or so being in England at 6 years old, 5 or 6 years old. Yeah, there were a lot of things. I remember being on a bus with my father, and my dad sat next to a young white girl, and her father, who's in the next seat, complained to the bus conductor and wanted to get us thrown off the bus because my dad sat next to this white child and he didn't like that. And I remember walking street, uh, 7 or 8 years old, and parents telling their children to spit on the nigger and stuff like that. I remember there were a lot of instances. One thing that really stuck me out, in primary school, we were playing a game, and a little girl, a white girl, had a problem undoing. She was wearing like an apron because we were doing some role plays, because I used to be involved in like school dramas and school plays. And so she needed some help to untie it. So I helped her untie it. And then the next day, her father came into the school and complained to the teachers that why did a black boy have to undo the the knot on his daughter's apron? So, so there was a lot of stuff like that that was happening all the time. And at one point, my blackness became something. I wouldn't say I was ashamed of it, but I couldn't get a handle on it. Fortunately for me, my parents, who were very Caribbean minded, I'm very proud of their Caribbeanness, uh, always kept me very well grounded. And for that, I'm extremely grateful. And after a while, I think from these early experiences, as I said earlier, I recognize that it's important to communicate to people who and what you are without losing sight of your core um, heritage, your core sense, but still find a way of building community. Because if the community is largely from a different ethnic background, a different culture, and you're living there, you can't live within, a vacuum.
Yeah.
So that was always the challenge to connect, to integrate, but still hold on to essentially who and what you are, especially one's culture, one's heritage. Yeah, that was a challenge. But it was a great challenge because it helped me realize the thing that people talk about in the last 8, 10 years about diversity and inclusion and these things. Yeah, I that's something that I've had to work with from a very early age. And by having experienced it myself, it really helps me to be able to see other people and connect with other people where they are rather than where I think they should be, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. How do these experiences shape your identity?
To a large extent, I think it pushed me more towards discovering and exploring, for want of a better word, my blackness. To the extent that I began to get extremely interested in Caribbean history and African history, and even the Aboriginals in Australia, and the Moors in Europe, because I began to read books like Great Men of Color. But it really should be great people of color because it wasn't only great men, of course, but and things of that nature. And then I began to realize, oh, wait a minute, a lot of the history that I'd been taught in a school that was run by Jesuit priests, to the extent that at one point in my life early, I even had the idea that maybe I should train for the priesthood. I even had that kind of thought at one point. Uh, but realize a lot of the education that I had and the people that were supposed to be heroes and that shaped modern society and modern civilization were not all white people. They were not all white men. They were a mixture, and many of them were people of color, people of African descent, people of Indian descent, people, uh, indigenous peoples from all around the world. So I developed this understanding and I began to research, and that really helped me develop a stronger sense of pride, of, yeah, my color, my heritage, my ancestry. And I say that because my mother, I didn't experience anything of my grandparents because my mother's mother died when she was about 6 years old, and her father died when she was about 8 or 9 or 10. So I didn't experience that. My father was born in St. Lucia, came to Trinidad when he was 6 with his brother and his mother, but they left the father in St. Lucia, so I didn't know him. And my his mother, my paternal grandmother, I left Trinidad when I was 4, so I had hardly had any interaction with him. So I didn't have the opportunity to get all, the stories and all the things that you usually hear from grandparents. Didn't have that. And because that generation, my parents' generation, they were born in the very, very early 1920s. Um, they were not open to talk a lot about their history, as I'm sure you know, that generation. They tended to just focus on what's happening now, especially when you go to another country. You're trying to live. So it was really useful for me to explore the history, Black history, not just of the Caribbean and Africa, but going to wherever people of color um, existed from thousands of years back, and seeing the contributions, that lifestyle and what they've made, the contributions they've made to modern civilization. And yeah, that has really been um, a valuable input that has driven me constantly. And also the reason why I spend, as you would know, Connor, a lot of my time working with people to help them communicate their ideas more effectively. Yeah, because I just believe that people in the Caribbean, especially because of the colonialization, we have we have incredible talent, we have incredible creativity, but most of us have this imposter syndrome. We have this thing, well, am I good enough? Can I compete with the, the colonizers, the images of success that I've been fed with? And so, if we can work together as communities, build that self pride, build that self confidence, so that we can express to the rest of the world who and what we are and our majesty, if you like. I think that's what is required because we have all the ingredients. It's to be able to communicate that in a way that people not only hear and understand, but they can connect with.
Hmm, I like that. And as you were speaking there, I remembered when I first made the decision to start creating content and putting it out there. And I was thinking about, I have this accent and persons may not be drawn to it, persons may be turned off from it. And I'm wondering if other persons probably have had that experience or that thought process that they see themselves as less than because of where they are from. And I'm saying this based on I've had experiences where I've traveled, I've been to different country, and yet still I had that sense of self-defeating thought process that my accent isn't good enough.
No, I hear you. I hear you. Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's a real big one. That's a real big one because that's what we've been led to believe. Now, people, and that's why when you ask me who is Garfield King, I started with where I'm from, simply because when I speak, people say, well, he's not from here. And I've been involved in broadcasting for this year, it's 45 years throughout the Caribbean. And when I started, I was given an opportunity to do a radio program in 1980 in Trinidad called Discover Yourself, Transform Your World.
Yeah.
And I was given that because the company that wanted to sponsor the program said, oh, because I'd only just come back to Trinidad at the time after, oh, what, maybe 20 odd years. The person said, "Oh, he could do it because his accent is good. He sounds good." Which at the time I said, "Okay," and it was complimentary. But then I realized, did he mean that I sound better than the other people that were there because my accent had an English kind of coloring to it? And later on, I realized that I've done, as I said, radio programs throughout the Caribbean, Barbados, Trinidad, uh, St. Lucia, Jamaica, on a daily basis with this same accent. But over the years, people say, well, you've been back in the Caribbean now for 40 years. So why are you still talking like that? And I'm saying, well, where I grew up, that's how my accent developed. And I was there for all of my formative years until my mid-20s, so mid-late 20s. Plus the fact that I've been involved in broadcasting. I was trained in Canada in radio and television broadcasting. And my training was always that you should be able to speak to anybody in the world who can speak English, and they should be able to understand you the first time without asking, what? You know? And so that has been my training. And so this is how I speak. And as you know, Carlo, if you hear me on the radio or I'm talking, this is how I speak. However, when I train people in communication skills and vocal prowess and public speaking, the first thing I say to them is, do not try to speak like me or anybody else. You must hold on to your accent because your accent is part of who you are. Your accent is part of what makes you unique, special, and vibrant. If you try to change your accent, it's not sustainable because it's not who you are. All I say to people is, what you need to work at perhaps is your enunciation. So the beginnings and ends of your words are clear, right? That's all. And in some countries, especially parts of parts of Trinidad, you might need to slow down a little bit. You might need to slow down a little bit, but don't change your accent because it's part of who you are. It's part of what makes you you. Why on earth would you try to talk like somebody else? It makes no sense to me. None whatsoever. Because if you start speaking like somebody on YouTube or TikTok, what then separates you from all of the millions of others?
Yeah.
You are what and who you are in an entirety. That is what I should see when I connect with you. I should get a sense that, hey, this person is who they are. And I'm feeling that genuineness. I'm feeling that truth of this person. That's what I should get, not, oh yeah, he sounds like. Mm, yeah. So we have been conditioned to think we're not good enough. We've been conditioned to think that we should speak like those people. We've been conditioned to think we should like what they like. We've been conditioned to think that the fruits and vegetables that grow in our backyard, there's something wrong with them. We have to import stuff. We've been conditioned to think that these lovely flowers and things that people in foreign pay serious money for to put in their houses, and they're growing all around us for nothing, you know. And we're trained to ignore all of that and buy their things rather than embrace our stuff. That's on the external. On the internal, it's like you're not good enough unless you can be like us. We have to change that. And if you check the trajectory, what has happened is, from our colonizers in Europe, we have been, most of us over the age of say 40, have been trained to look to Europe. But those who are under 40 have been programmed to look to the US. So you tend to find that, oh, unless it's what I see that they're doing in the US, and it can't be any good. We need to stop that. We need to just stop and think, what sort of history do we have as a people? And when I say we, I'm talking about Caribbean people, whether you're talking about Black, East Indian, Chinese. As a Caribbean people, our history goes back hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, and dare I say, thousands of years. That's what we need to hold on to, because there are some people of African descent who feel that their history starts with slavery. And I'm saying, no, that's just a tiny, tiny fraction. And it's devastating. And it has shaped how most of us view ourselves. And it shouldn't. It's a huge stain, if you want to call it that. But we are more than that. We are more than that. Our people existed for thousands of years before that. And the greatness existed before that. So, Kanu, your voice is fine. As we worked together years ago, the only thing I said to you is just try to pronounce your words so the beginnings and ends are clear, so that I don't have to say, excuse me, what you said? That's all. There's nothing wrong with your accent. And I'm switching the tables here, by the way, and as you have shown in your own development as a content creator and a person who provides stimulating content, you have proven to yourself, I think, that there's nothing that can stop me. If I'm wrong, tell me.
No, you're not.
Well,
Wow. I feel as if I am sitting in the middle of a history lesson slash a motivational, inspirational speech. Wow. This,
no, you're just talking to me. That's all. Yeah.
you know, I know. And that's the thing about it. I'm just speaking to you. And that is how I am feeling. Wow. You mentioned that this program that you initially worked for, or the name of the program was Discover Yourself, Transform the World. I think that there's such power behind that statement. What does discover yourself mean to you?
Okay. That's a really good question. Once again, I'm going to have to get in the time machine and switch it in
Let's
reverse.
go.
I mean, I've always been interested in comparative religions, spiritualities, and stuff. And so, somewhere around my very early 20s, I got very interested in meditation and yoga and stuff. And even my father, when I was 10 or 11, he gave me a book to read called Secrets of Mental Magic. Now, I was just 11 or 12 years old, and I thought, what? Why are you giving me this? I want comic books, not this stuff. But I started to read it, and it really uh, sparked an interest in these things about understanding yourself, how you think, how you process your emotions, and being comfortable with expressing yourself, being comfortable with your emotions. Because for a man, and dare I say, a black man, that can be a challenge. So I somewhere around the late 70s, maybe around 77, my interest in African spirituality, Indian religions, and indigenous religions of Australia and other places, I got involved with an organization which was heavily steeped in meditation and yoga. And I then, um, that's actually the reason why I came to Trinidad. in 1980 because the organization had a center in Trinidad, and I thought, well, I was born there, so maybe I could return to Trinidad and be of some assistance. So this organization is based in India. So I would be making, could you call it a pilgrimage? Possibly, but I'd go to India every year. It's in the foothills of the Himalayas. So, and then have these retreats of meditation and contemplative practices, etc. So for about 10 to 12 years, I actually lived the life of a um, uh, not recluse, but it was a life of celibacy, of prayer, of meditation, and things of that nature for a good while. So when I came to Trinidad, this thing about discover yourself, transform your world, not the world, transform your world. The idea was to share some of that information about looking at yourself with the general public. And in 1980, on the radio in Trinidad, there really wasn't anything else like that at the time. And so, what it meant for me at the time was understanding, exploring, because saying understanding suggests that you have answers, and I don't think any of us has all answers really. We're all searching. But it really was about looking at yourself as being more than just external. What makes you up? What are the elements that make you you? And then looking at your spiritual core, if you like, the soul or the spirit, whatever language you want to use. But really looking at self, realizing that you're more than just this body that is made up, that we see. And so the programs were really sharing that kind of concept of being a soul or a spirit and looking for the positivity and looking for what binds us together as not just as a people or a race, but as a species, as humankind, but also looking at it in the context of being part of creation, nature, and everything else. So the programs were about encouraging people to look deeper into themselves and to find something that they could latch onto that was positive and nurtured from the perspective of being more than just the physical body. And the ethos of that was if you could find a way in that exploration of developing yourself, transforming yourself in a positive, powerful way, you could then change your your world. Because your world is really like your family, the people you come into contact with, your because if you look at it, regardless of the size of the country that you live, for most of us, our world is only about 10 or 20 square kilometers where we work, where your family, where your education, and that's your world. So if you can find a way of discovering more about yourself, who you are, what you are, and get comfortable with it, that can spark a kind of ripple effect that might be able to have a positive influence around you. And if you think of that ripple effect, then it could go on and on and on. You
That's rather interesting. Meditation and yoga. That I have been on a journey where I started meditating just over a decade ago. And recently, probably about 5 or 6 years ago, I started practicing yoga. And I have had some really great experiences from meditating and from yoga in terms of mental physical, and I guess spiritual as well. You have been on this journey for quite a while, and 10 to 12 years of practicing even in India. How has those experiences shaped your identity as a man?
Oh, these questions are getting more and more challenging to respond to. Thank you for the challenge.
You're most welcome.
Yeah, I have been, I suppose, involved in meditation and contemplative practices for close to 50 years now. And the experience of being involved in that particular organization is interesting because it's an organization that was run predominantly by women. And then I traced back that historically, like most males, most of my primary school teachers, almost all of them, were women. And even when I, in England, got involved in scouts and things of that nature, interestingly enough, even though they were scouts and it was all boys, of course, the scout leader was a woman. And nearly all of my bosses, I had about 7 or 8 jobs in England before I returned to the Caribbean. And all of them, except for one, were women. And then I joined this organization that was run by women. So, so it was only much later on I sat back and I thought, well, wait a minute, that's an interesting journey. How not just the 12 years or so, because in those 12 years I wasn't living in India. I was still living in the world, working every day. But the rest of my time was involved in these practices and, as I say, traveling to India on a regular basis. So there was that. But when I left that uh, and got married, my wife, who was also involved in this organization, even though we left and we started doing different things, most of the practices and disciplines which I was doing before as well, I continued. And to get to your question without going too much around the houses, uh, oh, contemplative study, meditation, or whatever you want to call it, mindfulness, as people like to call it now, and things of it, what it has done for me personally, or what it is doing for me, is I think the primary thing is to get comfortable with my emotions and my feelings, and not to be afraid of my feelings, and to recognize that it's not about stopping thoughts or stopping or get away from me, you bad thoughts. It's more about recognizing that thoughts come, and the nature of the mind is to think. So, but it's how you deal with those thoughts. So the thoughts would come, even thoughts you don't want, but instead of fighting with them, because when you fight with your thoughts and feelings, you're actually injecting energy into them and making them stronger. And what I began to realize is that acknowledge them. Hey, okay, so you've come, have you? Thank you for coming. Take a seat, have a cup of tea or a cup of coffee, and I'll see with you. But right now I'm doing this, so you take it. Why that's important is because those thoughts that come, and many times they're negative thoughts, if you want to term them negative, I'd rather not call them negative, I just like to say could be distracting, is to let those thoughts know. This is going to sound weird, Kanu, but let those thoughts know that you acknowledge them and you will care for them rather than fight with them. Because fighting with them makes them stronger, and the more you fight with them, the stronger they get. There's an old saying, you must have heard it, what you resist persists. You keep fighting it, fighting it, fighting it. It gets stronger and stronger until you can't separate that kind of thinking from really who you are. But if you focus more energy on who you are, the the things within you that focus on growth, development, connection, etc., then those distractions are still there, but they don't interfere so much with what you have to do. And relating to manhood, the society, yes, and I'm happy to say, an increasing number of women are in leadership roles, thank goodness. No, but I think that that's brilliant, and long may it continue. But there's still a lot of the patriarchy. There's still a lot of men feeling that they should be the boss of everything. And part of that means not dealing with your emotions. But your emotions are part of who and what you are. So if you're not able to deal with your emotions and recognize them and accept them, how can you claim to be fully a man? You can't, because you are rejecting or repressing a significant part of who and what you are.
You preempted my next questions.
Oops, sorry.
Because I was about to ask, why should a man be comfortable with his emotions? And I think that's so interesting because I think as men, we often attempt to fight against our emotions. We attempt to suppress them, especially the emotions that we are uncomfortable experiencing. Emotions of fear, of sadness, that men should not cry. And this is something that has often been programmed into us. If a boy falls, it's like, hey, get up. You're a boy. You're not supposed to cry. But if our daughter falls, we run and we pick her up and we soothe her. And the boy, he has to he has to get over it. And
Man up, man
yeah,
up.
man up. That is it. And I think that is what we are experiencing with a lot of men. The inability to to deal with their emotions. And that term, man up. Why is that? Why should we address that concept of man up when we have to deal with things that we are uncomfortable with dealing, such as our emotions?
Mm. Yeah, I think it goes back and it transcends race, color, culture. It's right across the board, and there is the feeling that man is boss. All aside from the calypso, woman is boss, but there is the feeling that man is the head of the household. Man is the head, and the woman has to follow. Now, I don't want to get into all the socio political, religious, because of course we understand that in some cultures that is a very a delicate area to
Yep.
explore the male female gender roles. So of course there are those uh, cultural contexts, but generally speaking, as men, we've been brought up to believe that we have to be strong because showing any sense of weakness or instability means that we are weak and we won't be able to play our role as protector, etc. Now, I've always thought that's interesting because if you check the role of a lot of men, are they really protectors and providers? especially the men who have many children from many different women. How much protection and providing are they really doing? Um, so is that really the case? And even when you have a situation of somebody who is with their family, can you really push aside what you feel and still have a meaningful connection with your partner if you're not prepared to allow your partner to see, and I use this word deliberately, feel you? And that's why communication to me is at the seat of all of this. Skillful communication. If I am not able to look at myself and acknowledge that I'm feeling this, then it means anything that destabilizes me or makes me feel like I could be too open, I will fight it down because I don't want to look weak. So I'll take in front and I'll fight it down because that's what man's supposed to do, according to what we've been programmed to believe. And so, what is my tool? Often it's violence, because if I can't express myself, what is the easiest tool to pick up from the toolbox? You know that expression, if in your toolbox you only have a hammer, then as far as you're concerned, everything around you is a nail. And so that's the tool you're going to use for everything. And unfortunately, bringing up boy children, we don't give them enough tools. We give them only the tools to fight things down rather than the tools to mold, to shape, to nurture. We don't really give them those tools very much. And if a young man displays too many of these tools, we think, well, he's not being manly. Why? And I give you a quick story here. I was doing some training some years ago to a security part of our, well, I can't go into details obviously, but part of our system that deals with security.
All right.
And I said during this training about 10 years ago that we need to encourage our young men to be comfortable with their feminine side. And the pushback I got from that was incredible. It was like, I don't want my men. And, and so I said, no, what I'm explaining is the qualities that we admire in the supporting role of the mother, the nurturing, the compassion, those are things that shouldn't be just for women. Those are things that are human things. And we need to embrace them, whether we are male or female. Otherwise, you're saying that men should not be compassionate? Men should not be nurturing? Answer that question. And I think eventually they got to understand it. But as soon as you talk about anything man, anything feminine, then of course people go crazy. But it's not about that. It's all human beings have basic needs, needs for security, need for protection, need for love, need for understanding. There are basic human needs that exist regardless of male or female or what part of the world you're from. And when we don't get those needs met, we often react in ways because we can't cope. We feel there's a gap. And then we look to fill the gap with alcohol, drugs,
Hmm.
sex everywhere, or whatever it is. We look to fill the gaps. But do we appreciate that many of those things that we're looking for outside are already in us? It's just like we're sending rockets to go into outer space, but we haven't yet plunged to the depths of our ocean that's on this planet. And if we take it to the next level, we haven't plunged into the depths of what is within us. Okay? So this also speaks to your question earlier that discovering yourself. What is within you? What are the qualities you have? What are the strengths that you have? What do you need to work with? Because the way that a lot of men react to situations is because they feel that they're being disrespected, that they're done dissed. And often that means that somebody is suggesting that they're weak. And so to counter that, I have to prove how strong I am. So I will use a weapon, whether it's a physical weapon or whether it is my physical abuse or my language, or I will go out of my way to knock somebody down, not physically, but their reputation, because I don't want to appear weak. So just thinking about being vulnerable makes people scared. But it's often said that vulnerability is our greatest strength. Because to be truly vulnerable doesn't mean to say that you're weak. It means to say you recognize who and what you are. You're comfortable in your skin. So if people ask you, you can talk freely about who you are. Again, don't give away all your personal business, of course. But in the sense that nobody can really attack you or hurt you in that way emotionally if you are in touch with your emotions, because they can say what they like, but you know who and what you are. And that only happens when you start to make a level of peace and stability and comfort with your emotions and how you respond to different things. Because then you are in control rather than being at the control of somebody pushing your buttons. And Kanu, you know that when you make it clear that you have buttons that can be pushed, there are going to be people queuing up to push those buttons.
Oh, yeah.
Ooh,
As the saying goes, you hit the nail on the head.
yeah, yeah, yeah. But here's the deal. If I say to you and I'm talking to you and I display, well, this is who I am. So push as many buttons as you want. You're not going to get the response because I'm comfortable with that. So what can you possibly say and do to me that I haven't already processed and thought about? There's nothing. You can't you can't do anything. And I think that's the thing. We're trying to hide all of this stuff. If we start to get comfortable with our emotional state, to, what can you do? I mean, what can you do to really upset me? You're not gonna push my button. You can push my buttons, but I've already disconnected the circuit. So keep pushing, but it's not gonna do anything.
There's no connection.
Yeah, exactly. Connection is broken.
Hmm. Wow. Very powerful there. If I'm a young man and I've never had this sort of experience where persons have guided me about my emotions and the need to embrace my emotions and all of these things. And generally speaking, I have this masculine driven perspective of the world and of myself. What would you, how would you guide this young man in the first instance in for him to start developing that process of becoming much more in tune with himself? What would be the first step in that direction?
Well, that is a challenging one because I think it depends upon one's social structure because, let's be honest, there are people who have access to much more social support through family, through circumstances than others. And if one has grown up in an environment that deals a lot with things like church and community groups, etc., church, temple, mosque, etc., then there are those areas to work with, to go and speak to people. But uh, that's usually the first step, is to look at what's available around you. And I don't want to get political here or anything, but a lot of challenges that and I don't just mean Trinidad and Tobago, I mean as Western society perhaps, is a lot of the facilities and opportunities for young people to build community and to support each other. Many of those have been falling away because they all require some kind of funding, and the funding usually goes elsewhere. And when you think about it, perhaps some of that funding should go to those things so that the young people can feel a sense of support, can feel a sense of belonging, can feel a sense of guidance, rather than spending all the money after they have gone on to a situation where they felt that there was nothing to live for. So um, that's just my view. And I think that, yes, people say it starts in the home. Of course it does. But then if it starts in the home, what are we really doing to help parents cope? Yeah. What are we really doing to help parents cope? Because a lot of families are single mothers and some even single fathers as well, and very low income. So if I take time off work to because of my child is sick or something at the child's school, I'm probably going to lose money at my job because, you know, and so I don't do that because I also have to provide food. So if it's a case of going to work, forgetting about minding the child and developing the child because I have to put food on the table. So I have to go to work. Do you see how skewed it is? And then when the child is not being given we then start blaming the parents rather than saying, okay, what can we do to support parents? And to do it in a way that is not telling them what we're going to do for them, but asking them, ask the parents, ask the young people, what is it that you need in this environment that you think would help you? And of course, having the technocrats and the officials who can provide the ability to mold that. But I think we've spent a lot of time just saying, okay, well, this is what these people need, and give it to them. Are we sure that's what they need? Or is it that we give it to them because the optics are nice, it makes a nice news release, right? Yeah, I'm not casting any aspersions to anybody. I'm just speaking very generally here. I think that your original question is a difficult one to answer because a lot requires mentoring in its broadest possible sense. People say it takes a village to raise a child, and we've heard that so many times it has no significance anymore. Unfortunately, it is significant because how children are molded, it's not just by the parents. And in today's world, where even if the child is at home and you are being a really good parent or whatever, when that child is on that phone or that device in their room, you have to understand that you are then inviting hundreds of people from around the world into your home once that device is switched on. And those people are having an influence on your son and your daughter. So there are so many facets to this that I think there's no magic pill that works. It's a case of looking at the whole situation as a society and then looking at what is really required at every level of child development, of parent support, and of societal cohesion. And I think that, and it has to go beyond one party or one group blaming another group and back and forth, because that doesn't solve anything. Yeah? And maybe you'll edit this bit out, I don't know. But we talk about our leaders, and we have parliaments or senates or, houses in different countries. And we look at how these people behave, and then we say, why are our children so aggressive? Why can't they? And that's all I'm saying. That's all I want to say. We at every stage have to set clear examples and guidelines. And the fundamental aspect of that, Colonel, is about communication. Because almost all the problems we have faced as a species have been communication related. Lack of communication, miscommunication. I don't understand. What did you say? I don't understand what I meant. Etc., etc., etc. From the beginning of time. That's why I'm so, to go full circle, why I'm so passionate about this communication thing. Because why do we communicate? It is said to have needs met, to get something done, to achieve connection. And they're all done with the aim of improving understanding. And it's often said that understanding is the currency of communication. If you think about it, what is the only reason we really aim to communicate? It's to achieve better understanding. So until we are humble enough to accept that we really don't communicate very well, we don't. We need to work on that. Because without connection, we can't achieve anything. And for our children, they are, from the time, I was going to say from the time they can walk and talk, but it's even before that, of course, as you know, being a father. Those little eyes are open, those little ears are, they're seeing and hearing everything. And then when things go wrong, we say, but why are the children behaving like that? Do we stop and look at ourselves? How are we communicating? How are we behaving? So manhood to me is, when people say, well, manhood, I say, well, I don't even know what that is. Talk to me about human behavior. Because when we say manhood, that kind of further cements the idea of, this kind of macho thing. And I'm saying there's nothing wrong with that necessarily if it is balanced with compassion, with clarity, with empathy, with all the things that help to develop a person. The word itself, manhood. Let me throw this back. Sorry, not throw. Let me pass this back at you, Karim. When you hear somebody say the word manhood, what comes into your mind?
When I think of manhood, I think of the qualities that make you a man, the values that you expose. And for me, for one, it's responsibility, taking responsibility of your actions for the things that you do and as well as the things that you don't do. So for me, one of the most important aspects of manhood, and when I hear that term manhood, it's responsibility. That's the lens I look at it through.
No, that's brilliant. That's brilliant. So if I say to you, what comes to mind when you say womanhood? Does responsibility not factor into that?
Yes, it does. It does, because the woman is also responsible for the things that falls within her purview, whether it's the responsibility of family or within a relationship. So yeah, it's also responsibility.
So, responsibility, womanhood, responsibility, manhood. Where's all this hood stuff? Who's hoodwinking who? Nakan ambuskitse. But the point that I'm trying to make here is that we like to put things in compartments. We do as human beings. The brain works that way. You see something, you want to fix it. You want to put a label on it. And sometimes I wonder, is part of the issue that we're trying to label everything? Is that part of it? Because some of the qualities you just spoke about, manhood, which is great, are equally as valid for womanhood. And in a society that's constantly evolving, the role of man, woman in the family is different. Right? Should, you know, I used to take when our girls were in primary school, I'd be the one ironing their uniforms, and they went to a school with a thing that had lots of feet. So every morning I'm there. My wife often had to work in St. Lucia or elsewhere for several months, so I had to be plaiting their hair in the mornings and things. And when my daughters said some of this to some of their friends, they wonder, yeah, well, what kind of man is your father? As if to say, well, I shouldn't be doing that because I'm a man. I mean, of course, that was close to 30 years ago. I mean, but I don't know if our mentality has changed a lot since then. Why shouldn't I do that? I'm the one who does the laundry and I do most of the shopping. And that's historical because we only used to have one, and still only have one car. So I'm on the road most, so I just stop in the grocery and do the grocery. But that's how it's evolved. Uh, and when people talk to my wife, they'll say, oh, have you been to my new supermarket? Because in their head, she's the wife, so she should be doing the shopping. Yeah. What do you think about that detergent? Well, I do all the laundry. So I'm saying these kind of mindsets, and I deliberately asked you that question because I know that, well, I've known you a little while. I've had the pleasure of knowing you for a while. And I know that your thoughts and your consciousness has changed quite a bit over the years. Right? And then not just changed, but evolved and has grown tremendously. Uh, and is it okay on this podcast to say that is it that I'm very, very proud of you? It is like, it's okay. But the point is that part of the whole thing is the language that we use that is keeping us back. Okay. We know that there are certain roles because of biology and, physiology and ways of thinking uh, that are male and female. But until we can see the totality and I can embrace all the aspects in me that people associate with feminine, as well as the aspects that are masculine. And yes, because of my physiology, there'll be the masculine things are going to have a bit more power. Of course, we accept that, but it shouldn't be that. I don't want any of that because that's woman thing. I think that's where we run into problems when we try to create a line and say that is woman, this is man. I think that's where we become unstuck. It's about saying I am human. This is the role I'm playing. That is the role I'm playing. I'm in this body, so there are certain things that I will do in a certain way, and, this woman is it. But to say that manhood is something that is completely in a different universe? I'm not so sure.
That's rather interesting. And I've I haven't looked at it from that perspective, but I can see that train of thought that you are going along. And I embrace it as well. Because I think it is important, as you said, to not create these hard separations of I'm a man, so I'm not going to do that. A woman should only do this. Those are that is very important, and that's a very important approach that we should take as men and women moving forward. Because you mentioned that you did all of these things. You combed your daughter's hair, you go to the groceries, you did the laundry. And I'm sitting here thinking,
And the ironing, and the ironing.
and yarning. And I'm sitting here thinking, I have 4 daughters. I have never learned to plait hair. However, I would iron my daughter's clothes. I would do things that typically the man shouldn't do. I would do the laundry. I would be in the kitchen cooking. Of course, my wife is a better cook than I. However, I am going to be there in the kitchen. There are some meals that I would say I do better than my wife. So I would do those meals. And when she's in the kitchen, we are in the kitchen. It's not my wife is in the kitchen. When there's cleaning around the home to do, we clean together. As a matter of fact, we have a routine where one weekend my wife would clean, another weekend I would clean, then my daughters would clean on their specific weekend. And sometimes if my wife is tired, I would clean on her weekend. And this is something that if some men aren't doing it, this is something that I think that they should look at. And it's all about that support. But what I think often happens is there's so many narratives that is taking place on social media. And there may be a particular influencer who speaks on a topic and have all these strong views. And then you have persons who agree with it and they would then continue supporting, commenting. And it creates this, what's the word, an echo chamber. So it now, whatever the individual says, it's it's now amplified by all of these other voices. And I think that is what is pushing that that wedge between men and women. The amplifying of these negative narratives on social media.
Mm. And yeah, right. Mhm.
You touch on some very important topics here. You spoke about asking in terms of the support for parents and families. That it isn't this is what we are going to do for you, but rather it should come from that place of how can we help? How can we assist? How can we lighten the burden? And that is something that our leaders need to look at. And it's not of them speaking down to us, but really getting on that level with with us, with the people on the ground, the grassroots. And you also mentioned leadership. Leadership, and you know my thing on leadership. I embrace leadership. And I think that is also a critical aspect as well, where leaders or the persons who are in leadership position and seeing the impact that they are having based on their actions and the things that they say. So these are some important topics that you touched on, as well as mentorship in mentoring our young ones and not leaving the devices to be the mentors or the persons who they view and listen to on these devices to be their mentors. It is important for us as parents, as guardians, to be the mentors, to groom the minds of our young ones. However, I want to touch on an important topic that you spoke of, where you mentioned that some, depending on the situation, some young men may go off and do things that isn't necessarily positive because they have nothing to live for. That is an issue that is affecting men, where there are rising numbers of men taking their lives because they believe that they have nothing to live for. What are your thoughts on that?
That is a question that I think requires a whole series of podcasts to work with. And it's something that's very close to my heart because as a teenager, about five or six persons I knew, including family, um, and one who was like one of my best friends, took their own lives. Um, and it was all in the space of a few years. And that deeply impacted me. And again, one of the reasons that I felt it's important to do things that made people feel that even though it's hard, even though things are crazy, it's just for now. And there's always hope. Um, and communication in the sense of listening to people. Um, there, there's a point at which, especially during teenage years, as we all know, when we're trying to find who we are, what we're doing, and it's a very difficult time. And it's a very impressionable time. And unfortunately, as you talked about people on social media and other things, that's where a lot of young people can very easily be pulled in a certain way because very impressionable. They're searching for identity and they are often not given opportunities to see positive things, things that are hopeful. They're often told, especially young men, that, okay, put your head down, work hard, study hard, do this, do that, and everything will be okay. But when they look around, that's not what they're seeing. They're seeing that there's a certain type of person who that doesn't look like them or sound like them, who's getting ahead. And most of the people that look like them or sound like them are not. So, yes, what do I have to live for is part of it, but it's also, can you show me what my life could be by the time I get to 30? Because I was working with an NGO who had a campaign or was working on a campaign about still being for young men, being alive at 30. And I think you know something about that, where a lot of young men don't feel that they're going to be alive to then because of the lifestyles that they have chosen to be a part of. So they're living for whatever pleasure or excitement they can get for now, because as far as they're concerned, well, it's not going to be for long anyway. How do you reverse that? Surely it has to be about giving hope, in the sense of giving images, giving templates, ideas of what is achievable, not only way down in the future, but providing something now. Because I think a lot of young men are tired with hearing, well, you get through this 5 years from now. It's 5 years when you're in that state of mind is like forever. So, what can we offer young people now? And it has to be about involvement. And I think we have to stop blaming them, youth, and them. Excuse, I'm not very good at doing a Trinidad accent, so forgive. Uh, Even though I was born here, but yeah, we have to stop blaming young people and give them opportunities to say, okay, well, what are you good at? What is your special? What are you good at? What is it that you're really good? And finding ways of helping them to use whatever it is they're good at in a way that they feel that it's a challenge, that they're growing, that they're getting something out of this. And the something out of this also means some kind of income. Doesn't have to be a lot, but something that says, okay, this is you, this is what you're good at, this is what you love doing. We're going to support you in doing that. Right. And that's going to contribute to something else. So we can, you can earn something. So there has to be a sense of purpose that I am contributing, and the system is also contributing to me. And I'm doing something that I'm skilled at. I may not have even finished secondary school. I may not have graduated, but I'm good at this. And so, thank you. You're helping me do this. I feel a sense of purpose. I feel a sense of belonging. And the society or the system is also giving something back to me. It's not foolproof, because you know you're never going to get 100%. But in my mind, working with NGOs and civil society groups who have been trying this approach for a while and who have had to stop because the funding dried up, unfortunately. I mean, I've actually seen it working in communities. And I know you have as well, Connie. Once young people, young men especially, are respected for who they are and what they can produce, it's amazing what they do produce, right? But we have to honor that, and we have to also provide some kind of financial incentive so that they feel that they are part of this rather than they are outcasts. Because when they feel they're outcasts, that's when they're vulnerable to people who will take advantage of them, in the sense of exploiting them to be part of something that leads to a short lifespan. Yeah. Uh, does that make sense? Right?
It does. It does make sense. And you know what's interesting? Yesterday, I was looking at a video on YouTube, and it was around the topic of men and boys and that loss of loss of identity. And a study was actually done, and it it is around the men and boys who took their lives, and the notes that they often led. There were two words that often came up, and those words are uh, a sense of worthlessness and a lack of value. And what they identified as a possible remedy to that solution is helping them develop a sense of purpose.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, for sure. And that, along with that sense of purpose, I mean, I think that's brilliant. Along with that sense of purpose, that they're also being shown that they are validated. In other words, it needs to be recognized. What their achievements need to be recognized, and not recognized by just somebody coming with a camera and putting it in the newspaper, but recognized as being part of the society, that you are actually contributing to building your community. You know, and I think that has to be a priority for us as a society. Um, Validating the input of young men at all stages of their development, and also increasingly of young women too, because they're also being marginalized by this divisiveness in social media. All men are bad. That kind of mentality. Uh, so yeah, it's, if I may suggest, though, there is no magic pill for this, and it is unlikely to happen in the next 5 years of a government or a project or a strategic plan. It is something that may take a generation or two. And we can't look at young people today and say it's a lost generation, because it's not. It is absolutely not. The young people, they are valuable. We have to start, but also with the knowledge that we may not see the benefit immediately. The benefit will occur over time, because once you're trying to change the mindset of a people, that cannot happen overnight. But it has to start somewhere, and it should start now.
Mm. Yeah. Should have started 20 years ago, but we don't. We are not there. We ought to start now.
Well, the ancient Chinese say, when is the best time to plant a fruit tree? Oh, 20 years ago. And when is the next best time? Today.
Oh well. This is good. This is good. If you are comfortable with it, let me know. Or if not, we can always move on. I just wanna to go back a bit where you mentioned that there were quite well some persons from your family and from your inner circle who took their lives. Would you like to share on any one of those if it's comfortable with you?
Share in what sense?
Uh, your experience of having to deal with this occurrence.
Oh, yeah, okay. I can't talk about being vulnerable without being vulnerable myself, can I? So, yeah, I can. There are a couple of instances because of, as I say, I was involved in music. I used to play bands and stuff. So, around that time in the early 70s, there was a lot of um, illegal substances that were being consumed. And so a couple of people died of overdoses. Um, One was self inflicted, it wasn't an accident. And that was painful. Somebody else threw themselves under a train in a tube station because of depression. But I'll share with you one thing that always comes back to me in a very powerful way. A very close friend of mine, we grew up together. Our families were close. He wasn't of color. He was a white family, but we were very close, very, very, very close in many things. And one day, I hadn't after leaving school, one day somebody came to my door and said, can I go and visit this fellow because his parents are worried about him because he's very, very depressed. So I went to see him, and we went into his room, and he was there smoking cigarette, chain smoking cigarettes. And at that time, I was in music, and the band I was in, we were doing some good things, and there was a lot to talk about. So I went there to see him. His parents said that I should go as we were such good friends and see if I could, chat with him and get him out of this state of web. So I sat there for a while, and I said, "How you doing?" And he spoke a little bit. And the rest of the time in my meeting with him, I was just telling him about all the great things that I was doing, right? And all the success that and everything. And then I left. And then a few weeks or a month or so later, another mutual friend came to my house and said, "Oh, by the way, he jumped off a building and killed himself." And for about a year, every single night, I dreamt of him as if he was still alive. And I felt such sadness that all I needed to do, and I'm not saying that it would have made a difference that he wouldn't have jumped, but think about it. I was asked to go there and be of service to him, if you like. And what I did is I just went and talked, and were still about me, right? And that's when I realized that probably the most valuable thing you can do for another human being is give them your presence, to be fully there for them and to listen. Because when we say, "I'm there for you," what does that really mean? And again, that's another thing that pushed me in the direction of trying to understand what communication is and how we can communicate with compassion, with empathy, with love, with understanding, with care and curiosity, all of these things, because that stayed with me for a couple of decades. It was just bubbling. And yeah, even talking about it now, so many years later, because that would have been about 50, 55, 50, maybe about 50 plus years ago, that was. And it still resonates because, and again, I'm not saying that if I had gone there and just listened and been there for him, that he wouldn't have done it. But at least I would have known that I did everything that I could have done. Whereas I realized very quickly that I did nothing. In fact, I might have even made it worse. Yeah. When you allow yourself to be fully present for another human being and to listen, not just to hear the words, but to listen to what their needs are. You don't have to fulfill the need, but just to be there for them to offload it. Oh, that is a gift that is priceless. So that's what I have been working on and will continue to work on for the rest of my life, is just to become a better listener.
Thank you for sharing that. I think there's such an important message there. Because when you think of communication, you think about speaking. But there's also another very important aspect of communication, and that is listening. So communication is about speaking clearly, I would say, but also just as or even more importantly, I dare say, listening.
As you know, for decades, I train people in public speaking, and people come and ask about being trained as a speaker. And I sometimes say to them, "Oh, really? Have you ever thought about public listening instead of public speaking?" Because you're absolutely right. Think about it. How do you know what to say and how to say it unless you know what the audience, and the audience being just one person, needs to hear or needs to be told? The only way is to listen. And many times it's much more impactful if you listen before you speak, because the listening will help you to focus what you have to say.
Your words are more powerful when you listen first. That is what I got.
Yep, totally. I would agree with you. Thank you for putting it in a nutshell. Yes. Oh,
So let's make a bit of a shift. Tell me of a defining moment in your life. This could either be positive or negative. And what have you learned from that moment?
oh, there are many defining moments. I wish I had time to think about this to select just one. Um, I think a very powerful one for me, mm, was the death of my mother, uh, because my parents continued to live in the UK, of course, um, and she'd been ill for a while, and I'd been going back and forth. And at the time, we had in Trinidad that issue of, trying to get passports, and we had to make an appointment for months ahead and all this. So when she was on her final legs, I had already applied for a passport, but it wasn't coming through. So um, the day that I managed to get a flight, she was in the hospice, and my wife was getting ready to drive me to the airport. And a phone call came that my mother had just died as I was about to leave for the airport. So, needless to say, that hurt very much. And then afterwards, because I didn't, the last time I had spoken to my mother when I was in the UK was a couple of months before she passed. We had an argument, like mothers and sons do, I mean, wasn't earth shattering, it was just one of those things. But and I'd spoken to her on the phone when she was ill and in the hospice, but I hadn't seen her. So there was this unresolved feeling, which again about communication. And I couldn't shake it. Took me, I think, probably a few years because, as you know, Carmen, you know from your own experience, you never get over the death of the parents. You never get old. You just learn to live with it, right? You just learn to live with the new reality. Um, but because I didn't get an opportunity to be with her and to clear some of the air, it brought to mind that whenever you had an opportunity to say what matters to you in your relationship with somebody, say it. Because we just do not know if there will be another opportunity.
Could you just repeat that for me?
Sure. I was saying that whenever you get an opportunity to clear the air or say something that really matters to somebody that is special to you, whenever you get the opportunity to say it, say it. because you don't know if you will ever get that opportunity again. So communicate with the idea and the understanding that this very moment is all you have, because you cannot guarantee what will happen 10 minutes from now. You can't. You cannot. The past is gone. You don't know what the future is, but you are right here with this person, right here, right now. Connect, because you don't know what is going to happen next. That was something that came home to me very powerfully when my mom passed.
I don't think I need to add anything to that. What what is currently, tell me of a challenge that you are having now that you're working to overcome.
One of the one of the things I'm working with, and this surprises many people, that I'm quite a reserved person actually, although it may not appear that way, but I am. And one of the challenges that I've had most of my working life, especially being self-employed for the last 25 odd years, is my own self-worth, in the sense that the work that I do, because it is the work that I do is part of who I am. And it is my life, it's my journey, and has been for 50 plus years. So, but I have to charge people for it, right? Because I have to pay bills. And many times when people say, "Oh, you should check Garfield King because," and they give me all this pickup stuff, um, it's very difficult for me to believe it. And a lot of it, as we said in the beginning of this conversation, has to do with growing up, feeling less than, struggling to prove myself all the time. And even today, as a 71-year-old, oops, yes, even today, there are still times when I begin to question, well, are they really talking about me? Nah, they must be talking about somebody else. So it's to embrace my own value. And as I say, I've been working on it for more than half a century, and I'm still working on it. Um, because there are sometimes it's difficult, because what I do is who I am. And that's why it's difficult, because if I work more on my own self-worth, then it becomes easier to accept what is being said, because it's about me. So most of my life has been about deflecting. So you give me that praise and say, "Oh, well, thank you." And then I look at what the other person's done and give them all the praise, or pass it on to somebody else. The challenge is to be able to accept it with humility and not let it, and don't get attached to the praise, right? Not to be indifferent about it either, but to just thank you and honor the person that has given it with respect, and then move on. Yeah. That's one thing. Another thing is um, about being a parent. I'm not sure, I don't think of myself as a father, even though I have two daughters in their 30s. I don't. To me, little people that came along and came with them. They came along, and they've been part of my life, and I love them more. I love them to death, and love them dearly. And we interact, and I don't know what does that mean. My wife says yes, and my daughter say yes. You are. They try to reassure me, but as this is an open, honest podcast and interview, yeah, that's a challenge. I just love them so much, and they just feel like really nice people that I've known all their lives. Um, um, yes, I do. The responsibilities, the paying the bills, taking them here and there when they were growing up and all that. Yeah, I did all of that, and we had fun and all of that. But it was always as, yeah, we just we're just together. Yeah, maybe that is what being a father is. Maybe I don't know. What do you think?
Okay. I was actually going to say that sometimes I question myself. Like my eldest recently turned 18. So she's now legally an adult. And sometimes I question myself, like, are you really a father? Like, I can look back and remember when I was this little boy growing up. I can remember my teenage years as if it was yesterday. I mean, it was yesterday. But I really question at that time. When I look at her and when I look at my other daughters, like, I am their father. Like, I don't know. It feels strange. Like, yeah, I am their father. So yeah, I I identify with you there.
But even though you have that thought, all the things that a father is supposed to do, you do them.
Of course. Yeah.
But you don't do them with the thought, I'm the father, so I'm going to do it. Because I'm wondering if by having the thought, I'm the father, goes back to the thing that you were talking about, the definition of manhood. Well, I'm supposed to do this, I'm supposed to do that. Raw, because what I get from you and speaking to you over the years is that, especially when you were in the regiment and you were, sometimes spending a good time training and out of the country, that you did what you needed to do, not necessarily because it was a commitment, it was because you just loved doing it for these little people. You did it for these little people because you loved them. And so you just did it. It wasn't like, oh gosh, I'm daddy, so I have to do this. It was just, I love these people, so I'm gonna do it.
Yeah.
You did it.
And I did.
So I can resonate with that. I think all of these labels, I think we have too many labels. Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
And it's the labels that are causing the conflict, the frictions, all of those labels. Because within we are all one, it's all the same.
Mhm.
Yeah. But I love how you pointed out that, some of these struggles that you are still working on them 50 plus years later, such as that sense of feeling worthy. And that points to that there isn't a set time frame for you to get over something or to finally achieve a particular thing. It may be a lifelong process. It may just be that little bit you do every day, every week, every month, every year. So I think sometimes we put ourselves, we box ourselves in and think that we ought to be this thing by this age. We ought to be parents by this age. We ought to be successful by this age, and that limits who we can become, because there's no particular time frame when anyone should achieve anything or be able to do something. It may take an entire lifetime. So
Or, according to some philosophies, lifetimes. It's deep. Who knows?
exactly.
Yeah. There. It's always a process. We never reach.
Yes.
You see, it's like as soon as you think, if you get to a point where you think you reach, no, you can't, because it's a process. It's always a process. Like when I do coaching and training, I say to people, "Hey, thank you, because they have taught me something." Because every person I interact with teaches me something about how to tweak my communication skills to get through to somebody. So everyone becomes like my teacher or my guru or my coach or my mentor, because everybody's teaching me something about how to become a better human being. Sometimes it's about things that I should do, and sometimes it's about things I should avoid. but but nonetheless, it's always something. And everyone you meet, so you think, okay, well, I got this, and then suddenly you're introduced to somebody who presents you with a whole set of challenges that you never faced before, and you suddenly realize that all the things you thought you had dealt with start coming back. They rush back, and you go to your default position of either being aggressive or hiding or whatever it is, until you get to know that person and get to navigate your relationship. So it's always about, right? Plus the fact that who I was 50 years ago when I was in my 20s is not the person I am now. Yeah. There, at the core, certainly, there's still me, but everything that I've experienced on this journey has shaped me to be slightly different. So the way I respond to situations is not like how I responded when I was 10, 20, 30, 40, yet to, or even 60. Every time that something happens in my life, for all of us actually, it alters us a little bit. It changes the way our brain operates. It changes the way that we interact. Everything. So it's always, yeah, it's this thing in Buddhism. They talk about impermanence. Because of impermanence, everything happens. Yeah? If you said to your daughter, "Oh, don't ever change," we use this expression, "I just love the way you are," or something. Then the daughter turns around and says, "But daddy, if I didn't change, I wouldn't be able to grow up and be a woman." You know, everything we do, it changes us. And I think it's really about embracing that fact. Um, yeah, just embracing that right now it's like this, but it will change. Everything, everything that exists will change at some point.
It's about that constant growth. We are always growing, we are always changing, evolving, becoming a higher, better version of ourselves. At least that's how it
That's a nice story. Yeah, it should be. That would be nice. But truth is, sometimes we hit the reverse gear, isn't it? We kind of go back.
so we have to be mindful of that.
Yeah.
Garfield, if you had a message to give to the man who is listening right now, what would that message?
You put me on the spot here. I should have expected this question. Learn to accept yourself, your total self. Embrace your emotional self. Learn to recognize how you feel, why you're feeling it, and find healthy ways to express that to others.
It's powerful. As we prepare to close, I always end with this question. And the question is this. And it is actually tied to something you said earlier on in regard to being present and living in the moment, because we don't have the past, and the past has already gone, and we have no firm grasp on the future. And this question is, if you were to die at this very moment, what would be your legacy?
Kanu, that's even more difficult than the other question. I think it would be that I think I would like it to be simply that I was here.
Sí, is
I was here. Garfield King. It has been an honor, pleasure, and a truly beautiful experience sitting here having this conversation with you. And as I had mentioned before we started recording, that I had once been your student, and I'm still your student because I'm learning from you and learning how to communicate better. And at this moment, I'm seeing that full circle. I remember at the start of this journey of learning to communicate, little over 10 years. It's like a decade. And I remember saying to you, or questioning myself, I wonder if I can ever become as good as you. And you said something to me. You said that you didn't, you saw it as not me becoming as good as you, but as becoming the best version of myself, of going even further than you have gone. And in this moment of recording this podcast, I'm feeling as if you are handing that baton on to me to continue what you have started and having to have that positive impact by using communication and connection with others. And this is what I aim to do on this podcast, to communicate, to connect with men and bring across a message that can really play a role in how men see themselves and in the positive impact that they can have on their world, as you said previously, their world being that circle within with who they interact with, where they work, their community. And I think that this is so important. I see this as a beautiful moment, a truly beautiful moment.
Thank you, Carlo, for the opportunity. I greatly appreciate it. It's been a pleasure.
I just want to say thank you for checking out the entire episode. Manhood Speaks is a space where regular men like you get to share their experiences so that they can inspire other men. If you wish to be a guest on this show, just send me an email at manhoodspeakspodcast@gmail.com. And I want to ask you to consider subscribing. When you subscribe, you are not just simply subscribing to another YouTube channel. You are becoming a part of a revolution. You are joining a community of brothers, men who are redefining what it means to be a man in modern society today. So subscribe, and I will see you in the next interview.